The story begins with a man in his middle years. A truck hits him, and he ends up in a hospital. The doctors can't save him, but he hears a voice. Suddenly, he realizes he has been reborn as a baby in a different world. Guess reincarnation is the new afterlife plan. In the months that follow, he finds out that his parents are named Paul and Zenith, and they are both 20 years old. Even though he's a baby, Rudy still has the mind of a middle-aged man. He continues to learn about his new home. Imagine having a deep philosophical discussion with your parents about the stock market when you can't even say mama yet. As a baby, Rudy has a unique trait. He learns things faster than most babies, but he also has a strange habit. He often plays with his maid Lilia's underwear. One day, Lilia tells Zenith that Rudy is doing inappropriate things. Zenith doesn't believe her and says that Rudy is just a little baby. Well, Rudy, maybe you should have focused on learning peekaboo instead. A few weeks later, Rudy realizes that he has been reborn in the Middle Ages. He misses his old computer, where he used to watch AniTV. He also sees his father, Paul, practicing sword fighting. All of a sudden, Rudy falls on his head, and his mother gets worried about him. Zenith checks to see if her baby boy is hurt. Then she says she'll use a magic spell to make his head better. Rudy gets confused and thinks his mother is crazy because he never saw magic before. Suddenly, Rudy sees magic for the first time, and it heals his head. A few years go by, and Rudy learns how to walk. He can already talk, and he tries to learn a lot every day so he can use magic soon. One day, Rudy plays with some chests and finds books. While playing, Rudy's parents only have 5 books, and he realizes he can't read the writing in this new world. A library of 5 unreadable books, it's like going to a buffet with only one dish. Not much of a feast for the mind, Rudy. A year passed, and secretly, Rudy started learning how to read. He could already read most words, but his parents believed he didn't understand the meaning. So Rudy decided to try a spell and attempted to create a water ball. He made a water ball, but it burst quickly. Later, he tried again, focusing and imagining the water ball in his mind. However, Rudy ran out of magic power and fainted. After that, he practiced magic daily and managed to increase his magic power by casting the water spell multiple times. While Rudy learns magic without using words, he thinks about why spells are needed. He believes it's unnecessary to say magic words when you can do magic silently. The next day, he practices a water ball spell in the hope of gaining special powers as he grows up. In the days that come after, Paul is seen training with a sword when suddenly water pours on him. He wonders where the water comes from. The one behind this is Rudy, who has figured out how to create water balls. Rudy is happy because he has successfully learned and mastered the water ball spell. Who needs sword fighting when you have a mischievous magician in the house? After mastering the beginner spell, he wanted to cast an advanced spell. Rudy then recited the words of the advanced spell, and water began to collect around him. Rudy was shocked and accidentally shot a huge water ball that destroyed his home. His parents immediately ran to Rudy, and they were worried. His father, Paul, was confused, but his mother, Zenith, understood that Rudy had cast a spell. Zenith is very happy with Rudy's talent and wants to hire a magic teacher for him. At first, Paul said no, but then Lilia said they should teach Rudy themselves. In the days that came after, they hired a tutor to teach Rudy magic. Rudy thought the tutor would be an old man, but to his surprise, it was a teenage girl named Roxy. Roxy was shocked when she learned Rudy would be her student. She thought Paul and Zenith were being silly, thinking she could teach magic to a little kid. Zenith heard this and told Roxy that Rudy was really smart. After she told Rudy about the basics of magic, it's clear that he already knows about them. When we try to say magic words, Rudy doesn't need to because he can do magic without saying anything. Rudy tries to make a water ball appear with his magic, but he gets distracted by Roxy's underwear and can't finish the spell. Roxy sees that Rudy didn't finish the spell, but she's also surprised to learn that he can do magic without words. Later, Zenith notices that her tree is damaged and she scolds Roxy for it. Roxy starts feeling sad, thinking she could lose her job. Rudy tries to make her feel better, but his actions seem strange because he's really into otaku stuff. However, Rudy still succeeds in making Roxy feel happier. Out of nowhere, Rudy's mom appears and asks Roxy to join them for dinner so they can get to know each other better. In the evening, they all sit down to eat, and Roxy is delighted to have dinner with Rudy's family. Rudy is happy these days because he feels like he's starting a new life. Who would have thought that being reborn in a medieval fantasy world could lead to such heartwarming moments? In his old life, he had a lot of problems with debt collectors who were angry at him because he didn't have any money. One day, he saw 3 students in danger as a truck almost hit them. When he tried to help them, he suddenly woke up from a bad dream. He realized he fell asleep because he was tired and had no energy left. After his nap, he heard his parents complaining, and he felt like joking with them. Then, unexpectedly, he saw Roxy, who seemed worried after hearing his parents. Half a year has passed since Roxy became Rudy's home tutor. In the evenings, Rudy is always learning about magic theory from her, and he always tries to sneak a peek at Roxy's underwear. Roxy knows that Rudy is acting inappropriately, and she scolds him for it. Roxy tells Rudy that she is a demon, which is why Rudy's parents were surprised on the first day. Medieval fantasy worlds always come with their own set of unexpected revelations. After that, Rudy learns that 500 years ago, a war happened, and the demons known as Spelled were the most powerful among them. The Spelled demons were banished to a demon continent, and there were many negative rumors about them. Because of this, Roxy instructs Rudy to stay away from the Spelled demons. Later on, Roxy tells us that sometimes her hair looks green because of how the light shines on it. Rudy believes he's an expert in dating simulation games and can score endless points. Following that, Rudy attempts to catch a glimpse of Roxy changing her clothes, but she spots him right away. After 6 more months, Rudy becomes a master of advanced magic and continues practicing swordsmanship with his father. Sadly, he excels only in magic and lacks talent in swordsmanship. A few days later, Roxy joins other villagers in watering the wheat. Rudy observes other kids playing outside, but he's scared of people because he was often bullied in his previous life. Roxy notices Rudy looking sad and asks what's bothering him, but Rudy doesn't want to trouble her. After that, they look at the beautiful view of the village. Roxy tells him more about the world beyond the mountains of his village. Then Roxy suggests he finds a magic school to become a great mage. Rudy doesn't want to show his fears and says he is satisfied with Roxy's teaching skills. She becomes very sad because she knows Rudy will one day surpass her in talent. Ah, Roxy, you're a great teacher, but it's tough to compete with someone who's not only got the brains, but also the stubborn determination of a middle-aged man trapped in a kid's body. After a year, they celebrate Rudy's birthday, and Paul gives his son a sword. He knows that Rudy is still too young for a real sword, but Paul wishes that Rudy becomes a strong and skilled warrior. Next, Rudy receives a magical grimoire from his mother, and he is delighted with her gift. Finally, Roxy gives him a wand to increase his magic power. He thanks Roxy and is happy about his new wand. Out of nowhere, Roxy becomes sad because Rudy has his last exam tomorrow. Rudy is scared to leave his house because he remembers how he was always picked on by other students when he was younger. He wants to have superpowers to make his life better. Also, he's scared to go outside because the other students still don't stop bullying him. Sadly, he stays locked in his room until he becomes a middle-aged man. The next day, Rudy experiences his last day with Roxy. He still feels afraid to leave his house. Roxy thinks Rudy is scared of horses, so she goes horseback riding with him. Rudy doesn't want to go outside because it reminds him of bad times. When he finally steps out for the first time, he feels worried. However, he soon realizes that people aren't paying attention to him, they're actually looking at Roxy. That's because everyone in the village knows Roxy and greets her nicely. As a result, Rudy starts feeling less scared about going outside and begins to enjoy the beautiful nature around him. Maybe the key to overcoming social anxiety is having a famous demon tutor by your side. Who knew? Following that, Rudy's final test starts. Roxy wants to use a special water magic spell. She can only use it once, and Rudy has to learn it as well. So Roxy starts reciting the spell, and it creates a powerful thunderstorm. Suddenly, heavy rain begins, and the thunderstorm intensifies as Roxy concentrates on the magic. Unfortunately, their horse Caravaggio is struck by lightning. Roxy stops the spell right away and heals Caravaggio immediately. She says sorry and expresses her wish to watch Rudy use the spell. Rudy takes out his wand, and Roxy shields Caravaggio, so Rudy starts casting powerful water magic. He even makes a storm cloud while casting the spell. Rudy feels sad because he has to say farewell to Roxy after the final test. He wants to show her how much he learned and manages to cast the spell successfully. Later, Roxy praises him for creating an even more powerful spell than she can. After that, Roxy congratulates him, and he becomes a sacred-level water mage. In the evening, Paul and Zenith invite Roxy to stay with them, but she declines. She wants to continue learning about magic, and Rudy's parents understand her decision. Then Roxy bids goodbye to Rudy, and he receives a necklace as a gift. She calls the pendant a lucky charm. Roxy then bids farewell to Rudy's family, and they all feel sad. Rudy chases after her and thanks her for teaching him so much. In the days that are happening now, Rudy is looking for the panties that were taken from Roxy. Meanwhile, his parents are having a good time in the garden outside their house. Then, Rudy comes and asks if he can go outside to play. His parents feel happy because it's the first time he decides to play outside. Paul tells his son to be friendly with the neighbor's children, and Rudy goes out to play. Later, Rudy explores a forest and hears boys calling someone a demon. Suddenly, one of them tries to throw a stone at the bullied kid. Rudy quickly rushes over and stops the boy who is being mean with a water ball. They get mad at Rudy and try to get back at him by throwing mud balls, but Rudy is better than them and manages to defend himself using his water ball spells. After that, Rudy sees a person who is shaking. He feels impressed because the boy who was getting picked on looks really adorable. Rudy wants to assist him and uses his water ball spell to clean him up. The boy thinks Rudy might be trying to tease him, but then he realizes that Rudy has no intention of hurting him. Rudy checks to see if the person is a magical creature, and he feels relieved when he sees that the little boy is not a magical creature, and he notices the boy's ears. Later, Rudy learns that the boy is a half-elf even though neither of his parents has green hair. Suddenly, the boy starts crying, and Rudy tries to make him feel better. The boy who was bullied asks Rudy why he helped him, and Rudy answers that he likes helping those who are not as strong. He offers to be his new friend and introduces himself. He discovers that the boy's name is Sylph. Rudy, the ultimate anti-bully hero and friendship ambassador. In the afternoon, they play together. Rudy finds out that Sylph never had a good friend before. Sylph then asks Rudy to teach him a water ball spell. Rudy agrees to teach his new friend magic. In the evening, Rudy says goodbye and goes home. Later, Paul is waiting for him, and he is very angry at Rudy. Rudy is accused of hurting a neighbor's boy, but there's a misunderstanding. Rudy tries to explain, but Paul doesn't listen. Rudy also gets upset and rebellious with his father. As a result, Paul slaps Rudy, and Rudy is on the ground. Rudy is sad because his father doesn't trust him. Paul becomes upset when he discovers that his son intervened to help someone who was being bullied. He says sorry to Rudy, and they have their very first family disagreement. Paul later questions why he argued with his son. Paul can't stop thinking about the boy who got hurt nearby, and he worries that Rudy might become a bad person because he's so young and already skilled in advanced magic. At night, Paul still feels guilty about how he treated Rudy and is scared that Rudy doesn't care about him anymore. The following summer arrives, and Rudy begins practicing his sword skills. Over the course of 6 months, Sylph has been mastering some powerful spells. Sylph is a quick learner, and she notices that Rudy isn't using any words when casting spells, so Sylph decides to ask Rudy to teach her this silent magic. Rudy agrees to give it a shot, and surprisingly, Sylph quickly grasps the art of using magic without uttering a single word. Sylph is eager to uncover Rudy's secret technique, but her attempts end in failure. Rudy is skeptical of Sylph's abilities because he too struggles with wordless magic. Nevertheless, Sylph has no trouble learning it. Later on, the two friends enjoy some quality time in the farm fields. However, Rudy becomes envious of Sylph's beauty, and then, unexpectedly, it begins to rain. Rudy extends an invitation to Sylph to come to his house. Lilia is getting ready in the bathroom, and she suspects something about Sylph. On the other hand, Rudy wants to take a bath, but he's puzzled why Sylph isn't undressing. He can't understand why he won't remove his clothes. Rudy decides to take off Sylph's clothes forcefully, and only then does he realize that Sylph is a girl. Ah, the classic case of mistaken gender identity in a fantasy world. Later, Paul is bathing with his beloved son, trying to cheer him up. Rudy feels guilty because he knows he did something wrong, so he decides to go and apologize for his rude behavior. He tells Sylph he's sorry for thinking she was a boy, and she starts crying even more. Paul is surprised at how foolish his son has acted during the apology. The next morning, Rudy trains with his dad, but he loses right away. Paul notices that his son has trouble with girls, so he offers some advice about women. This helps Rudy understand his mistakes, and his dad successfully supports him. Suddenly, Sylph comes to visit, and Rudy tries to follow his dad's advice but ends up acting a bit weird. So he decides to be honest with Sylph and tells her he misses playing with her. She accepts his apology and wants to play with him again. At the same time, Rudy feels glad to have a nice girl as a childhood friend, and they start getting along again. They have a great time laughing together. A few weeks later, Rudy learns that Zenith is going to have another baby, and the whole family is excited. In the afternoon during lunch, Lilia surprised everyone by saying she's going to have a baby. This surprised Paul a lot, and he apologized for not being faithful to Zenith with Lilia, who works as their maid. Later in the evening, Zenith was very sad and couldn't believe that Paul had been disloyal to her with Lilia. Zenith asked Lilia about her plans, and Lilia said she'd help with the baby first. After that, she wanted to go back home, but Zenith was worried that Lilia and her baby might struggle on their own. Zenith didn't know what to do. Rudy might need some magic to navigate these complicated family dynamics. Rudy heard everything and already thought of Lilia as part of their family. Rudy tried to blame his dad for everything, and his mom believed him. But Lilia said she wasn't involved. Rudy then tried to convince his mom to let Lilia keep working as their maid. Zenith is currently feeling quite sad. She has agreed to let Lilia stay in her house, and she has warmly welcomed Lilia into her family. Zenith also has a desire to express her displeasure with Paul for his cheating. Meanwhile, Lilia is feeling thankful for Rudy's assistance. The following morning, Paul expresses his anger towards Rudy, and Lilia is curious about why Rudy helped her. It becomes apparent that the problem began because Lilia has been acting strangely every night, and this is due to the interactions between Paul and Zenith each night. Lilia, like anyone, also craves some social interaction with men. Now we're looking at Rudy when he's a baby. He plays with Lilia's underwear every day. Lilia feels uncomfortable about it. In the past, she thought Rudy was strange, but starting from yesterday, she thinks he's a great person who saved her baby's life. A year goes by, and Rudy gets new siblings. Paul plays with them every day. Suddenly, the two little girls start crying, and their mothers quickly take care of them. Rudy watches his parents taking care of the babies, and he wants to be a cool big brother. Rudy's baby aspirations have evolved from playing with underwear to becoming a role model for his new siblings. Quite the character development for our young protagonist. Since his siblings were born, Rudy has gotten to know Lilia better. He finds out that Lilia and Paul have known each other since they were kids. Then Rudy gets called for sword training. He knows his dad is a strong warrior, and he respects him a lot. Rudy tries to use magic to attack, but his father is skilled at observing and avoids Rudy's attack. Rudy loses, and his father teases him. In response, Rudy teases his father back. Suddenly, Paul asks if his mother would be mad if he sleeps next to Lilia. Rudy advises him not to do it, but he understands his father's perspective because he's a man too and likes his father despite knowing he's not the best. Odd, the complexities of father-son relationships. Then, Paul asks if Rudy wants to go to school someday. Rudy says he doesn't like school because there are only nobles there. Rudy learns that noble girls don't play sports and tend to become overweight in the future. Paul suggests that his son should focus on just one girl. Later, Rudy realizes that Sylph will soon surpass him in magic knowledge. At that moment, Sylph notices he has been deep in thought. Rudy expresses his desire to attend school, making Sylph feel sad because she doesn't want him to leave. Tears well up in her eyes. However, Rudy comforts her, assuring he has no plans to leave her. In the evening, he already envisions marrying Sylph and having lots of fun together. Suddenly, his father appears, holding a letter for Rudy. Roxy informs him about a new student who resembles him and has a tendency to misbehave. This student often bothers Roxy, leading to her punishing him. Roxy also recommends that Rudy enroll in the Reincarnated magic school to expand his magic knowledge. Paul is impressed by Roxy's accomplishments as a Water King class mage. He then questions Rudy about whether he truly stole Roxy's belongings. That night, Rudy thought about what Roxy said about going to a magic academy. The next morning, he had breakfast with his family and talked to his father. Rudy surprised Paul by telling him about his plan to attend Reincarnated magic school. He also asked if he could go to magic school with Sylph. Rudy wanted his father to pay for both of them, but his father said no. He explained that their family didn't have enough money to pay for even one person's school fees. So Rudy asked his father to find a job so he could also help pay for Sylph's school fees. Paul wanted to support his son and agreed with his idea. The following day, a female beastman named Ghislaine arrived, and Rudy was impressed by her attractive appearance. Zenith greeted her old friend Ghislaine, who had been an adventurer. She also introduced her baby girl Nora and jokingly mentioned how lucky Nora was not to look like Paul. Ghislaine's arrival is bound to add some interesting dynamics to the mix. Out of the blue, Zenith and Lilia said farewell to Rudy, and Paul clarified the situation to him. As a result, Paul begins to fight with his son, and Rudy attempts to defeat him using magic. Paul possesses great skill with a sword and manages to corner his son during the battle. Paul demonstrates his true strength, wanting to illustrate to Rudy that he lacks it. Nonetheless, Rudy gets knocked out and regains consciousness in a carriage. Soon after, he encounters Ghislaine, leaving him bewildered as he doesn't understand why he's riding in a carriage with her. Following this, Rudy desires to learn why he's sharing the carriage with Ghislaine. Abruptly, Ghislaine tosses a letter from his father at him and requests him to read it aloud. The letter contains Paul's teasing remarks about Ghislaine, referring to her as a gorilla. This angers Ghislaine, but Rudy manages to calm her down and clarifies that his father was just joking. Subsequently, Rudy discovers that his new task is to teach magic to a noble girl. Furthermore, he learns that his father had a romantic involvement with Ghislaine in the past and informs Ruvid that she's a master of sword fighting. What happens next? To discover the rest of the exciting story, just leave a comment and ask for more.